So I came across I don't know if it's called a study or a paper. I came across some information from UBS. This is the UBS um, Billionaire Survey 2025. And what it is a list of the top things that billionaires, that when they were asked what they worry about, at least as it relates to markets and money. And that caught my attention. It was interesting because if you think about it, there's these sayings like, money doesn't buy happiness and more money, more problems, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, really, when I looked over this list of what topped billionaires' concerns in 2025 and moving into 2026, it's really not that different from really anybody. And there's probably a message in that. Really what it got me thinking about, and of course, I'm not objective in this, but it really highlighted the need for a real advisor, a true advisor, not just somebody who just manages your investments, or just somebody who does your taxes, or any one kind of niche piece of your financial life. It's really somebody who can speak to the entire thing, and it's what we do. So again, I'm not objective in this, but when I look at this list, it takes a good advisor, it takes a solid advisor, somebody who's not going to be a weak link. When this list we're going to go through, well, a lot of these things will inevitably pop up. If they haven't already in 25 and 24, they will in 26, 27 and beyond. These things are going to pop up, and it requires somebody who's either been through these things before or has been very thoughtful about how these things might impact clients and what they've done kind of ahead of time. So I'm going to read a couple of these off. Some of them are a little surprising to me just in terms of where they rank. So the top three list of worries of billionaires, again, according to UBS Billionaire Survey 2025. Number one is tariffs. 66% said tariffs would have a big negative impact over the market. War, they said major geopolitical event. I'm just going to say war. That was 63%. Political or policy uncertainty comes in at 59%. And then there's a bunch that are kind of in the high 40s. Higher inflation is at 44%. Debt crisis at 34%, higher taxes, 28%, a global recession, 27%. And now we get into the teens. So things like higher interest rates, financial market crisis, supply chain disruptions, et cetera, et cetera. Way down the list are kind of existential things like a global health crisis, climate change, things like that. Those are polling in the 8%, 5% ranges. So, but those top ones is interesting because I'll take a couple of these. Okay. And again, I'm not doing this to toot my own horn or anything, but I do find it interesting that the things that are on the billionaires' minds are things that we've dealt with on this podcast over the past 18 months or so. And the reason why we deal with it on the podcast and I do episodes on it is because I'm dealing with you, when we have one-on-one meetings and we do review meetings and it doesn't really matter where the client is. It could be a medical doctor, a surgeon just starting off his or her practice, or it could be somebody in corporate America who's got maybe 5 years to go. It's even more so for current retirees who are already retired. So let's talk about tariffs first. Tariffs was the number one concern of billionaires, and we dealt with that on April 4th, 2025. That's episode number 33. It's actually our most popular episode. It still gets listeners to it. It's the highest downloaded number. It's got the most responses to it. And really, I think that's because we discussed it during the event. It wasn't after tariffs came out and we all got to see what happened. It was during it. And one of the things that I take pride in with that is that I spent I really looked at the current administration, the Trump administration, as what was their economic plan? What were they talking about? And they had these pillars out there. One of them was tariffs. One of them was deregulation. Another one was growth. So they had these things that they wanted to accomplish. They led with tariffs. And so I was kind of ready for it. Not like I predicted it, but I already read up on it. And so we dealt with that in April. And so the concern that billionaires had, I mean, we really addressed that early on. War, I'm not going in order of rank here. I'm just kind of picking them up. War, we dealt with that. We actually, that was before we even did the podcasts. That was back in the blogging days, still way back in 2023. And that was the October 7th terror attacks in Israel, and what might come out of that. And it was also kind of in the shadow of Russia, Ukraine. So there was a lot going on geopolitically. And we wrote a lot about that. We talked a lot about that. And really what we did is we looked at it in context of history, just like the tariffs. If you listen to that podcast, we just went back in history and said, well, what has happened before? What has actually happened before? Because worries are a weird thing. There's some saying out there, I'm sure it's from a Stoic, that, most of the worries that we're worried about never occur. They're just in our head. And that really is kind of what happened on tariffs, at least in terms of the predictions of how we're going to have empty shelves and the economy was going to crash and all these horrible things were going to happen. And, we're going to be in this huge recession and GDP would go negative and all this stuff that never occurred. Well, that happens a lot with war too. War's scary. Market downturns don't usually happen in a vacuum. They occur with events, war, tariffs, recessions, major bankruptcies like Lehman Brothers, things of that nature. So it's the scary event with a downturn in maybe the stock market that has people usually concerned. And wars are never going to stop. So we've got a litany of data we can go back and look at and see, well, how did recoveries occur and how does diversifying portfolios help, et cetera. Policy uncertainty is a really interesting one, simply because we've got the midterms coming up, and we're going to do a podcast on midterms. We'll record that soon and get that through compliance. But we actually dealt with the presidential election, I think 3 or 4 times. I'm just going to list 2 here. One was way back in way back in February of 2024. It was podcast number 4. About the presidential election. We did a couple others, and the other one I'll highlight is November 13th, 2024, right after the election. That was podcast number 23. And, again, we highlight in there, well, okay, we can be upset. I've said it many, many times. Half of my clients are upset if a Republican wins the presidency, and then half of my clients are upset if the Democrats win the presidency, but the markets don't carry the way. And so that's what I keep nailing home. So whether you are a thousandaire or a billionaire and you're worried about policy uncertainty, at least as it impacts the stock market, really long term, it doesn't. The markets go. Capitalism works. And so we highlight that over and over and over. How about the debt crisis? We spoke about the debt crisis recently. That was October 20th. That was podcast number 47. Not that there is a current crisis, but just the current situation of the federal debt and how fast we're spending, and where is that likely to lead, and that'll take us into higher taxes, which I thought was interesting on the Billionaires list. So we talked about taxes and the future of taxation, October 7th, 2024. That was podcast number 20. We also discussed global recession. That was on the list as well. That kind of towards the top. And we discussed that on September 23rd, 2024. That was podcast number 19. So, we've really been down this road, not because I was predicting anything, but because I've been doing this for almost 30 years and I've been through a lot of this stuff. And so I kind of know what's on people's minds because I meet with you guys all the time and I'm talking to you, either in review meetings, or it could just simply be you pick up the phone and call me, you send me an email or something like that. We have a quick conversation around it. But I'll say this as we kind of close up this podcast, these worries, these things that are on your mind, some of them will occur. It could very well be that we do have higher taxes in the future. So it goes from a worry to a reality. What we like to do on planning, so this will take us out of just stock market conversation and more into actual planning, is we just have to be proactive around that. I don't want to set you up in a situation where your plan only works if taxes are the same or lower. That would be silly. We're going to set it up so that if taxes go up, we've thought through that and we have a plan for that. That if taxes are higher, that your income and how you access your income in retirement, we have a plan for that. The same thing for higher interest rates. Just kind of off the top of my head, we want to have the ability to have access to capital at rates lower than maybe the market rates that are out there. And that takes some foresight and some planning and some working through things. And these are all parts of a real financial plan. Your investments, we've said it many times here, your investments, the point of your investments, the purpose of that money is to fully fund your financial plan. In the financial plan exists all of your hopes and dreams and desires and legacies and all the things that you and your spouse really want. Well, the engine that funds that are the assets, are the investments. And so we have to not just handle the investments appropriately and not fall prey to worries and make short-term decisions, which will cost you money in all likelihood. But we also have to look at long-term issues and be ahead of those curves. And so, again, I'm happy to report, again, I'm not objective, but I'm happy to report that of these, 10 or 14 line items on here that billionaires are worried about, that we deal with these routinely. Tariffs, war, policy uncertainty, inflation, debt, higher taxes, global recession, higher interest rates. These are all things that we deal with on the regular. So you may not be a billionaire, but if you're worried about anything like that, it's on this list, or anything else that's on your mind going into 2026, just reach out to us. I'll end with this. If the podcast has been helpful, like it, subscribe to it, post it out there, get the word out. A lot of you are doing that. I really appreciate that. We put a lot of effort into these. We do a lot of research. And so it's nice to kind of get the word out and help other people too. That's it for this week, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Source UBS Billionaire Ambitions Report 2025, The Rise of a New Generation, published December 4, 2025, available at https://www.ubs.com/global/en/media/display page NDP/EN 2025-1204 Billionaire Ambitions Report 2025.html. Registered Representative and Financial Advisor of Park Avenue Securities LLC, OSJ 5280 Carroll Canyon Road, Suite 300, San Diego, California 92121-619-6846400. Securities products and advisory services offered through PAS, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial Representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, NY. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Westpac Wealth Partners LLC is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. Insurance products offered through Westpac Wealth Partners and Insurance Services LLC, a DBA of Westpac Wealth Partners LLC, CA Insurance License Number 0D34103. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. Diversification does not guarantee profit or protect against market loss. Equities may decline in value due to both real and perceived general market, economic, and industry conditions. Investing in securities of smaller companies tends to be more volatile and less liquid than securities of larger companies. Investing in the bond market is subject to certain risks, including market, interest rate, issuer credit, and inflation risk. Indices are unmanaged and one cannot invest directly in an index. This material is intended for general use. By providing this content, Park Avenue Securities LLC and your financial representative are not undertaking to provide investment advice or make a recommendation for a specific individual or situation or to otherwise act in a fiduciary capacity.
A69247771XP128.